like to welcome Mark Minson to QA at the Point and introduce Mark as a longtime friend of mine and a fantastic QA engineer. And he has prepared this presentation and has given it a couple of times. So he's now an expert. We can call him an expert in shifting from manual to automation, at least in giving the presentation. Welcome, Mark, and thanks for joining us this evening. And we'll just get right to it. So we'll turn the time over to Mark.
Hi, I'm Troy McClure. You might recognize me from such presentations as how to get the most out of your lazy employees and testers are the besters. All right, that is just for fun because my wife and I have been binging Simpsons for a while now. We're like on season 10, and I feel like it's never going to end. I'm like, there are 30-something seasons. So like Kevin said, so he and I have known each other for about 15 years now. Can't believe it's been that long. But and I describe myself as a Swiss Army knife in QA because I've done just about everything from manual testing to automating in a variety of languages, as well as project management, being a Scrum master. So I've come from a lot of different places in my career for this. But one of the things that, and this kind of goes in juxtaposition to what Kevin just said. So the landscape of the QA industry morphs, right, from manual testing, sometimes done by any poor bloke that you could rope into it. So you could say you had QA, I mean, right? And we still face that in the industry today. And that is the case actually with one of the guys on our team. He was doing technical support and they asked him if he would become the QA. He had no experience, no degree. And he was basically the poor bloke that got roped into becoming a QA. But now they're looking for people with software or computer science degrees, software developers and test, SDETs, right? That's what's chic right now. And there's a tightrope we have to walk between loyalty to longtime employees and fast, efficient QA. And it's a tightrope our team recently had to overcome and traverse. Today, so I'm going to be talking about how our team made that shift from being manual testers to automators, or from old and busted to new hotness. Now, the problem arose, Mark, as it does in many organizations.
Sorry, cutting off real quick. We can see your slide, your presenter view as well as your slides. So,
all right, let me move that out of the way then. That is weird, but that's fine. Okay, does that work?
Yeah.
Is that better?
Yep, that's better.
All right. You can see all my notes. No. All right. So the problem arose, as it does in so many organizations, from not having the manpower to keep up. I felt like these poor little guys down in front, right? We totally got this. And I know a lot of QA that have been in this situation. As I've gone to STAR conferences and talked to people, we have contractors that revolve through our organization, that this is a very common experience for QAs. So the ideal dev to QA ratio is 2 to 1. 1 to 1 is amazing if you have a developer that can produce high volumes at decent quality, right? But those are rare. Our team had a dev ratio of 3 or 4 devs to 1 QA right now. And we're working with a library of more than 20 products, at least half of which are in development at any given time. So in a single sprint, a QA may have stories dealing with 2 or 3 different products, which means little to no overlap testing, right? And that's one of the things that we buy off of a lot when it comes to manual testing, is that I can test 2 or 3 different devs work at the same time, because it's in a single product, and I can run through them both, because I'm going to hit them both through a couple of test cases. But in our case, that is generally not how it works. And to top it off, the teams weren't following good software development process. So QAs weren't giving estimates on stories. And when the sprint started, nobody had any idea if QA, not even the QA. So the results, right? Or worse, as QA, we make it look like we're keeping up so we don't get fired, but bugs continue to sneak past us as our work week stretches from 40 hours to 45 to 50 to 60-hour weeks, and heaven forbid, longer than that, just to try and keep up. And then it came time to release, and we informed the business it would take 2 to 3 days to release the product, to regress the product. So have you guys ever been part of this conversation? But we need it out today. Well, then we can't vouch for the quality. There's a risk. Why is there a risk? Didn't you get it all tested after the dev finished? Yes, but so we need it out today. This conversation generally leads into negotiation on exactly how soon it is needed and how much extra time the QA will need to put in to meet that deadline. I know I have had that conversation, and I hate them. When I was hired as at the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, where I work now, the manager asked me to start writing automation for their new API. So I did. Early on, I had those conversations. But as I kept working to build more automation, by the time I moved to my current position, the conversations went more like this. Can we get that out today? Give me an hour and I'll let you know. I would kick off my automation, and an hour or so later, I checked the results, reported any bugs, and we decided if it could go out. And it was awesome. But I was the only member of our QA group in that situation. So one day, during my one-on-one, my manager and I were talking about some of the portfolio's recent and mildly disastrous releases. And you know it's bad when a team always releases on Monday, because then they have hotfix Friday. It's a given, right? That's when you schedule hotfix Friday, there's a problem. And so he and I were talking, and he said the whole QA team needs to be capable of automating so that we can shorten regression time and cover more of the product faster. Now, we'd recently hired several QA engineers that knew how to code, but they weren't finished with school yet or didn't have much experience. However, we had half the QA team that had little to no coding knowledge or experience. These were also the engineers, unfortunately, who had been on the team the longest. Over 10 years, some of them had been working on these products. But he gave me the ultimatum. Every QA needs to be automating every day, or at least several times a week. So we were faced with 2 options. One, we could lay off those manual testers and lose all of that domain experience and bring in automators, which, one, come at a higher cost, and 2, would require months of training just to get up to speed on those products. Or we could teach our manual testers to code. And before I was moved to my current team, they had tried the first approach, actually. They brought in 2 vendors who claimed to be QA automators, and they did okay. It wasn't the best automation I've ever seen. But when they were forced into doing the whole job of QA, including the manual testing and writing test cases, they just didn't know how. They were automators. And so what test cases that we got from them, honestly, were almost worthless. We've rewritten almost every one. And bugs were shipped. It just wasn't a good situation. So because there's a process to effective and amazing QA. A good manual tester knows that process and follows it. All they're missing is the coding ability. We didn't have the budget to go out and replace all of our manual QA. And the current market in Utah, we struggled to find capable QA to fill what positions we did have. Proof that anyone can learn to code. I went back to school to get a computer science software engineering degree when I was 30 with 5 kids. This picture is taken shortly before I started. I spent the next 4 years going to school full-time and working full-time. So if I can learn to code in that situation, anybody can learn to code. I'm gonna stop that. My internet connection is becoming unstable. Shocking. So the second option really was our best option, and it worked because we did the following 4 things. First, we established a plan. Without one, you are doomed to fail. Second, we got management approval for the plan. This is super important because you're going to need to take work time to meet and to practice. Number 3, we got the team buy-in to the plan. If your team's not on board, they're going to fall overboard. And 4th, we held each other accountable. Code checks, support, answering questions, and I'm going to go into each of these in more detail. So number 1, we had to decide, we had to establish a plan, right? So we had to decide how to teach a team ranging from their mid-20s to early 50s to code. Do we pay for them to all attend a college class or 2 at the local community college? Do we have a developer create a curriculum and teach them during lunch? Do we find an online resource like the free classes from Harvard or Yale? We looked into all of the above. College classes get expensive and time consuming because your QA now becomes students who have assignments. And you might, I guess you could pay to audit the class, but that's kind of really throwing money down the toilet. And even with an online class, if you're doing this online instead of having them go and sit in an actual classroom at a college, you're asking for an after hours commitment or more time during the day where they're just going to be sitting and listening to a lecture, right? And then they have homework. So you're losing about 4 to 8 hours worth of productivity every week, or you're asking for extra overtime. It's doable. It's because it's only a 16-week semester, right? But it's not ideal and generates the most pushback. Then we tried to put together a curriculum just on our own based on my college experience and those who are still in school at the time. We found it required a lot of time and preparation. We held 3 hour-long meetings with 3 QA engineers trying to put something together. We ended up with 5 lessons figured out in that time. not created, not detailed, just high level ideas of what we teach in each lesson. So it was already getting pretty expensive to try and do our own. Finally, we looked at other possible teachers, and we found a beginning coding class taught by Bob Tabor, who runs a website called Developer University. This basic training class was on Microsoft's freely available training videos until a year and a half, probably maybe even 2 years ago at this point. But when I got retired, Bob was awesome and posted the whole series on YouTube in one 8-hour plus video is what it's at right now. But it is broken down into each of the distinct lessons. And so you can work through those lessons in chunks, and each one is very clear where it ends and where it starts. So now that we had a training medium, we outlined a schedule for watching the lessons and practicing the skills we learned. Each lesson in Bob's video is about 20 to 30 minutes, and this is really for C#, but he really goes over a lot of object-oriented basics as well. So we set our goal to code 2 lessons a week, which we calculated at about 2 hours of time watching and practicing. So with 25 lessons, this spread our training out over about 12 weeks. And the first lesson is really just about setting up Visual Studio Code and is shorter than the rest. So we actually rolled that into week 1. So week 1, we had 3. So next we went to management. We took our plan, and they loved the idea of utilizing a free resource. Saving money is always a big plus for management. And we pitched that the time commitment to watch and learn would be rolled into the time they wanted us automating. This meant no additional time outside of work or loss of productivity, because our practice would actually be writing automation for the products that we were testing. Next, we had to get the team on board. So with management approval, we took this plan to the team. This is a crucial step. Every team member has to be on board with this project. The ability to succeed comes from jumping in with both feet. Even one toxic member can slowly drag the team down. You might encounter a toxic person or two. We had one who wasn't toxic, but wasn't actually doing the work, and it showed later. Toxic employees really require a one-on-one chat and to talk about why they don't want to do it. There's always a reason. Sometimes it's fear of the unknown. Sometimes it seems like too much work, right? And they know how to do manual QA, and so they're good at it. Learning the code just seems too hard. But you need to find out what that is, so that you can help them overcome their concerns. Because in the end, every employee has 3 options. They can accept the change and go with it. They can try and modify the change to something better or something that works for them. Or third, there's the door, right? They have the option to leave and go find a job somewhere where they aren't required to learn automation or how to code. But show you are willing to work with them and address their concerns, and that goes a long way to taking them out of the toxic zone and getting them on board. So an example of this is when I worked at Landesk, which is now called Avanti. Our engineering department decided to move from XP as an agile development process to Scrum. And they had every team appoint a Scrum Master. They did a really high level, probably about a 4-hour training with the rest of the engineering department in one huge group on the process of Scrum and how it worked. And then they said, "Okay, that's what we're doing. Go for it." And we had a lot of engineers who'd been there a long time, and they were not on board. And as far as I know, management didn't try to help them overcome their concerns. We had the signs in some manufacturing plants that says X number of days without an accident. We put one up in our bullpen that said X number of days without somebody quitting. It was that bad. And we didn't get over 7 for about 5 months. But the other problem was that these teams, because they weren't all in, these teams were not succeeding in doing Scrum. So for those of you who know what Scrum is, you have a burn down chart that shows the amount of hours of work that you have at the beginning of your sprint. And over the course of the sprint, that is supposed to decrease down to 0 at the end of the sprint, because all the work's been completed and checked in and QA'd and checked in. And all of the hours are used up at that point. And our team was the only team in the entire engineering department that burned to 0 every sprint. Because our team, our boss sat down and went over those 3 options with us and said, "So what options do you guys want to take?" And we talked about it. Most of us were really on board. We didn't really have that many concerns on our team, but obviously there were some concerns on other teams, because the other teams would start to burn down, and about halfway through the sprint, it would level off because they weren't doing it right. They weren't on board enough to learn how to do things the right way. And so they really struggled, and it showed to management that there was a problem. And so, having already been through that, I knew that this step was really, really important. And so what we did is we got everybody in a conference room. We outlined the plan with them, talked about concerns, and made sure that everything was addressed, right? And I wanted to make sure everybody was on board. So we went around the room and got a verbal commitment from everybody that they were going to complete the training program. You could also, if you want, go ahead and create a contract and have everybody sign it. And it's showing unity as a team to say, hey, together we're going to do this. And that's the other important thing to emphasize, is that it's not you're not doing this alone as a single QA engineer. We're doing this as a team, and we're here to support and help each other in this process. And a big part of that is, and help engineers get on board, is to help them stay on board, right? Is reminding them that this is the future. Automation isn't going away. It's getting smarter, and Kevin did a fantastic presentation 2 years ago, I guess it was now, at Star West on AI. But learning to code and writing automation expands the individual's skill set and makes them more valuable in the marketplace. It helps them stay relevant. So when I was laid off from my first QA job, about 1.5 years after I got my degree, I had been doing automation for 4 years. Every job I applied for at that point in time wanted automation experience. So I got lucky. But my experience and my degree turned into a 33% raise from what I had been making. So now results may vary for other employees, but if the time comes that these QA engineers find themselves needing a new job, they will be able to find one if they can automate. So now that we had everyone on board, it was time to implement the plan. So the first thing we did is we set up individual code repositories for each engineer. It was a great practice for checking in code and learning how to check out code and work with it. And then we had a place where we could go and we could look and they could share their code with everybody. So everyone could go and look at everybody else's code and see what was going on. We made sure that everybody had installed and had a basic understanding of Visual Studio, because not all of them did. But we have, part of this because we all have licenses, right? I work in a C# shop, so, and there are a variety of IDEs that are free if you're a Java practitioner or whatever. A lot of this all applies regardless of your chosen language. Bob uses, in his stuff, he uses Visual Studio Code that anybody can download for free. So that's a plus. And then I scheduled all the meetings where we would get together as a team and we would talk about what we learned in the last lesson. With all the meetings scheduled, we were able to manage conflicts, and we had a better chance that nobody scheduled another meeting in its place. So that way we didn't have to manage conflicts along as we got down the road. We also showed code to each other and we talked through it. Like I mentioned, I was the only QA with a degree, a software engineering degree. But we did have a couple others who were like on the cusp. And as far as I know, they're still on the cusp of getting their degrees. I keep getting after them to, like, they have like 1 or 2 classes left. And I keep getting after them to just do them online and get it over with, because I'm like, dude, it's going to make your life so much better. If ever you need to go somewhere else, a degree does so much for you. But anyway, so between the 3 of us, we were able to answer pretty much any question that anybody had, as far as coding went. And we also encouraged each other to do the lessons and apply what we had learned in, that's right, there we go. Like, I knew that slide seems really empty. We encourage each other to do lessons and apply what we learned in writing automation for our products. So once we had covered all the training videos, we actually spent the next several weeks on lessons about Selenium automation. Those with experience with Selenium taught lessons on page objects and writing your automation in unit test format. We use NUnit so that our tests are easily executable on our local machines with debugging. And also, one of the benefits of the new Azure DevOps is that now because we write them as unit tests, they can be implemented and executed in the Azure DevOps pipeline for releases. So we can release a product and then it will execute our automation automatically, which is pretty awesome. But the other thing that this did is it also got our team talking about automation constantly. Almost every day around our cubes, I would hear somebody be like, hey, will you come over and have a look at this? So I just wrote this test. We're talking about coding, and it was awesome. It just really helped everybody keep in the spirit and be encouraged. Application. If you don't use what you learn, you lose it. So to help with that, we set up automation projects in our code repository for almost all of our products. Now, with 20 plus products, it was a huge task. So what we actually did is we just started with the major products that didn't have any automation on them. And that was, we focused on our high usage applications first. So we made sure that the basic folder structure was in place and worked with everyone to get their first test written. And there's a huge, it's so awesome that first time you finish writing code and you press start and it runs and everything works. It's just so awesome. And we also started writing a shared set of utilities for using Selenium. We created a scroll and click function. We found that we were writing a lot of 2- and 3-line sets of Selenium code over and over and over again in our test cases. So utilizing good coding development practices, we actually pulled those 2- and 3-line sets into a separate repository and created methods around each of them so that it would clean up our code and make things a little more clear. And then we also require code reviews on every check-in. And that's just good practice. And that's, and so we also talked about in our meetings, we would go through code standards, we'd show cool things we might have done, and help get code on, or help get help on code that might be troubling you. We also go over test cases to make sure that those are being written and written effectively. I've had some people some of the guys that when we first started, they were like, well, if we're going to automate all of this stuff, why do we keep needing to write test cases? And there are a couple of reasons for that. One, I fully believe that the manual following good QA process gives you the best overall experience and increases your quality. And one of the good QA process is writing a test case, because as you start writing a single test case and you start writing out the steps, for me at any rate, I find that my brain shifts into another gear. And I start looking more critically at the application and about all of the parts and pieces that I'm going to be testing. And I start finding that I write better tests, and I start writing tests to do, it's negative testing, it's security testing, all of those different aspects of QA that we need to make sure we include or at least consider come to my head as I'm writing a test case and I'm plotting out those steps. And so we end up really getting better coverage by writing a test case first and then automating it. Now, I'm sure that we've all had a project or a repair that when we finally reached the end and flipped the switch, turned the key or whatever, and it worked, we celebrated. There is a dopamine hit when your efforts are successful. Like I said, that first time you see an automated test that you wrote work is like awesome. And it makes you want to keep writing. So the first time, let's see, so it builds confidence also. The first time your test runs all the way through, all the hiccups are gone, you fixed all of the tweaks, the bugs, or the little nuances, and your test runs all the way through. It's a thrill, and it builds confidence that this is possible, that you as a QA can do this. So celebrate, right? Bring in pizza, ice cream, or take everyone out to lunch when every QA has their first automated test written. We were promised pizza, but it never happened. There's still a little bitterness there, but don't be that way, right? If you're in a management position and this is your team, or if you're in leadership as a QA lead and this is your team, let them know how happy you are that they have succeeded and that they're on their road to being better. Show them that the effort was worth it. Warning. Thought about making the font bigger, but as I've talked about already, right, you must continue to preach good QA process. Because as your QA become more comfortable in the code, you don't want them forgetting to write test cases or do the comprehensive manual testing as they write the automation. And it's going to take time to make time. QA estimates will need to go up to accommodate the automation that they weren't doing before, but they are now. And they'll come back down as some stories require just tweaks to existing automation and not writing it for the first time. But you need to allow your QA engineers time to automate. And less regression time does not always equate to more work getting done in a sprint. The QAs have not all of a sudden become superhuman because they're automating. And if you are not the QA lead, if you're not the manager, right, and you're just you're the grunt QA, when you need time to automate, you have to increase your estimates. Because if you don't, then your work weeks begin to stretch again, right? Because you're trying to squeeze in automation because you know it's the right thing to do. But you're afraid to increase your estimates. But if you can tell them, hey, my estimates are going up because I'm automating, and they can see, and and then later on down the road, you can show them what you've automated, and you can run an automated test for them. I have yet to meet a manager or a business partner that doesn't think that's cool and has not gotten on board with, yes, absolutely, you keep doing that. It's going to take you a little bit longer to do all your stories, but I want more of this. And especially when you can show them the benefits, right? And those benefits come when I can kick off the automation at 5 o'clock and then go home. And then I come in the morning and I have a report ready for me on how the automation did. And then I can show them the report, and it didn't cost them any of my time to do that. And they love that. So for us, this process worked. We didn't lay off a single person in our group or on our team. And now every QA knows how to code and is coding. Along the way, we've also established standards for naming and comments like real developers, but also so new team members have some documentation they can refer to when they get into the code. But as more and more automation is written, regression time goes down significantly. And your confidence in each release then goes up. Not just your confidence, but your business partner's confidence as well. As more releases happen with fewer and fewer bugs, they start praising the team. And that is also a great feeling when the business partner comes to you and is like, hey, we released 2 weeks ago, and I know we're getting ready to release, but I just want to let you know that like our bug counts are down 50%. And we're so excited. You guys have been doing great. And that praise coming from the business partner is huge. So that is how we shifted our manual testers into automators. And we still do that today. We hold a weekly meeting with my group, and we broke down into smaller subgroups because we have smaller teams, but our whole portfolio meets together as QA. And we did our whole portfolio together for this. But we broke down into just smaller teams, and I still hold meetings once a week with my team, and we show automation. We talk about test cases, and we I keep them focused on process and how we can do better. So they ask questions on their code. We show some really cool stuff. We started automating APIs and been working through standards on that, and so we've had some demonstrations on what they've managed to accomplish. For them, it's been huge. to build their confidence and to keep them excited about it. So in case anybody wants it, here is my information. And again, the link to the training video. And that's it. Do you have any questions?
Thanks, Mark. Well done. Lots of good information. Looking over here in the chat for any additional questions. I think we answered the questions as it went. Oh, except for the, there's a question about a recommended test case technique or tool. Maybe you have a favorite?
I'm a huge Microsoft fan. I have been for a long time because I love how their DevOps, it used to be TFS, but now it's their Azure DevOps, all runs together and links together. But really, anywhere you can write out test case steps, any tool that allows you to see those pretty clearly and include snapshot or screenshots and additional things like that is good. But I am a huge Microsoft fan when it comes to that. I love being able to write my test case that ties to a story, that ties to the code the developer checked in. So when my test case fails, I write a bug and the developer just follows the links all the way back to the check-in that they made where the bug exists. And they're not trying to dig for it or trying to remember what code they'd worked on at that point in time that made that caused the problem. So
I had a question about the planning stage that you did. You mentioned that video, and I was looking over the video, and it seems like that just teaches how to program. So after the person learned how to actually program, how did you teach them how to do testing?
So that was what, so we scheduled out our meetings, our first set of meetings over those 12 weeks, but I actually scheduled 25 meetings total. And after that, after the first 12, once they knew how to code, that is when we moved into, this is how you code in Selenium and how to make that applicable to our applications. And those meetings transitioned into, all right, let's write a test case together. Let's automate together as a group, and they could watch, we put it up on the projector, and they watched us go through, and we talked through as we wrote the code. This is what this is going to do. This is what this is going to do. This is how we write a page object, and this is how you access your page object into your methods. And then when we were done, we spent about the first half hour doing a demonstration, and then the next half hour of that meeting was spent with each of them writing code on their machines. And we'd walk around and just kind of help answer questions or see how they were doing. So
that's cool. So do you still do that meeting, or like once everybody kind of was up to speed, you just didn't do that anymore, or what's up with that?
So once everybody was up to speed, after that 25 weeks, we really were pretty confident in everybody's ability to at least keep going. And at that point, we broke down into, because let's see, we had, let's say about 15 engineers, 15 QA at that point, and we're spread across the 20 different products, and really segmented into 3 major groups, 3 major teams. And so after that, we broke down into those 3 teams and set up individual team meetings so that we could discuss things that were a little more specific to our core set of products that we work on.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, another question. Do you have any training on how you have your unit tests run during a build?
I do not. We have a Microsoft rep that we've been talking to. We've been utilizing our dev lead, who is amazing at all things DevOps and stuff. And so he's been actually helping us more than anything else. That would probably be some good training though. I'll see if I can find something, because that would be great.
There's another question.
You also asked to recommend a percentage.
Oh, yeah.
Is that where you were just going?
You can answer that one. And then the next one I'm going to throw back at the channel. What are best screen recording tools for manual testing of bugs? So if you have an answer to that, go ahead and post. I see Catalan as one of them. But yeah, go ahead, Mark, and answer the percentage if you've got an idea on that one.
Okay. When you get started, and this is what my manager told us, is he wanted everybody automating at least 20% of the time. And so we kind of figured that out, right? That's an 8-hour day right now. It's 8 hours a week of automation. And so we said, okay, that's our commitment. And so most weeks we hit our 20%. But when I wasn't managing the team and was just doing it on my own, when I was doing the API testing when I first got there, I got to an 80-20 split the other direction. And that's pretty much ideal. If you can do 80% automation and 20% manual, then that's really about ideal. I don't know that you'll ever get to, I don't think you should ever get to 100% automation, because for me, when you're writing automation, you should be running the manual tests simultaneously so that you know what your outputs and inputs are supposed to be, and then you just put them right into your automation as you're running manual test.
And then based on your experiences, what are good exit criteria when to stop testing?
When to stop testing or stop automating?
It's for a release. So at what point are you basically saying you're ready to go and it's good enough to ship it?
We have a regression suite of test cases that as we go through and write test cases, we also, it's part of our QA process. We mark them as, if it's a major feature, if it is functionality where we have found a lot of defects, those test cases are marked as regression. We tag them, and then every regression we run those. And those are actually also our top priority test cases for automation, because we've identified them as, this is something we should be working on every single, we need to test this every single time we release, and we should automate that. And then our automation becomes our regression. And that's really the goal. But typically, yeah, it's if all the major features are working, we haven't found any showstopper bugs, we've run through all of our regression tests, and then we call it good for the release. And sometimes we don't get all the way through our regression tests, and we sit there with the business and we say, this is where we're at. You wanted to release on this day. We got through this much, and this is the risks. And as a QA, a lot of our job is risk management. And it's just a matter of letting them understand, helping them understand the risks that are remaining, and letting them make that decision. Because as soon as they make the decision to go ahead, knowing the risks you've outlined, the responsibility is to some extent is off your shoulders, right? A little CYA, and let them make the decision to go to release with all the knowledge. If you don't tell them that there are problems, or if you don't help them understand the risk, then it comes back to you. But if they know all the risks and they decide to go anyway, then it's on them.
All right. Next question. Would you recommend test automation certifications to get better recognized to be hired, such as ones from ISTQB?
No.
I hear it.
If you don't have a degree, certifications work, right? And that is a good way to say, hey, I have learned my stuff to some extent. But if you have a degree and from there, it's all experience. Especially in this industry, we have a developer. He's a Dev 4. He is going back to school to get his software development degree. But he's been doing this for over 15 years now. He's been a software developer, and we hired him and made him a Dev 4 based solely on his experience and what he could do, and not on the fact that he didn't have whether or not he had a degree. So
I think that's been kind of a consensus, by the way, when asked this question in a group of experienced managers or experienced QA engineers, is the certifications are probably interesting at best, and it's really about experience. And if you're wondering, well, how do I get experience? There's this thing called the internet, and you can go test any of those websites and start, write your own test cases, write some automation against it. Be mindful of and respect the performance and stress testing, all that. But you can write some basic tests there and show that you can do it. And that's way more important than a certification that says that you have the theory behind it. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah.
And I'm backing up what Craig is saying as well in the chat. Okay, and then
I agree with that.
Do you have any experience in mobile automation? And answer that first.
I have a little bit of experience in mobile automation. I'm not gonna, it is not a lot. We currently, most of our mobile automation is done through emulation in Chrome. There is a lab that somebody magically set up for use in our office that we can, that we're supposed to be able to run tests against, but we're still trying to get access to that. We have been for about 2 months. So yeah, right now, most of it's just done in Chrome emulation. So.
Sounds good. All right. So Richard will ask, that's a great question for probably for the Slack channel, QA at the point, or even general, if you want to ask that in the general and get some other ideas. Any suggestions or best practices on how to manage existing automation debt versus new feature automation requirements?
Yes, that is where, because we started totally in debt, so much debt. And so what we did is we actually went through and we created work items, user stories, and then put tasks underneath those with hours on them for automation. And every sprint, we bring them in. So we fill up our, we fill up half of our 20% with automation debt. And then the rest of it just comes in our increased estimates for our regular user stories and bugs.
Yeah, and another methodology basically along the same lines as Mark is if you have this debt, meaning you haven't started automation or you've just gotten behind, is take the new features and automate the new features. And eventually you're going to make your rounds and you're going to come back to every feature. So start with new features, and as they're developed, then you just automate those. Let's see. Do you have any bias? Yes, everyone has bias, David. No. Do you have any bias when hiring for manual QA if they do not want to automate? Is there a place for those QA people?
I am sure there is. It is not anywhere I have ever worked.
Lucid is hiring.
And the biggest reason is that the other I have not worked anywhere where they have adequately staffed their QA.
Yeah. And that's why Craig keeps raising his hand, by the way. In the background, Craig is saying, yeah, he's got an awesome ratio. He's got an awesome team and size of teams. So, but a lot of teams are not in Craig's position, right? A lot of us are in a much, I'll call it worse ratio. And like you're talking about, Mark, it's, you're the one that's doing all the manual testing and all the automation, right? Craig is able to farm that off to his automation team, and they focus on that. So
yeah, I would love that, but right now we do not have that luxury.
Or devs. So. Okay, Craig makes his devs do it too. Yeah. So automation debt. What's an example of automation debt? And I'll just give a quick answer to that. So when you haven't been able to automate something, and then the next sprint comes around and there's another new feature, and that's the same thing with development work, right? When the devs haven't been able to write the automation, or they haven't been able to go back and fix all the bugs, right? That's what we consider to be automation or engineering debt. And that's just loose ends that we would like to get to, but the business is dictating that we're going to move forward. And so we're going to call that debt. Would you say the preferable languages for automation are, yes, 1, Python, 2, JavaScript, 3, Java. I'm the one reading the question, so I get to interject. Yes, Python is #1 by far, and you should all be learning Python. Okay, but obviously that's not how everybody feels about it. That's a personal bias, if you wanted to hear a bias going on. But yeah, so Mark's using C#, and really the industry is actually much more Java, definitely not C#. C# is definitely in the minority these days, and Java would be much higher. And Java, Python right now are kind of fighting for #1. And then JavaScript, if you're on front end stuff, then that's also probably #1 for your front end work. But yeah, Mark, you can comment on that. But
no, I agree. Java as a free, because it's free, and the IDEs to use it are free. Java is definitely the biggest language in the development market all around. But they have Selenium for Java, and you can, so yeah, whatever floats your boat. The basic principles of object-oriented programming, I think, apply whether you're using Java or C#. So
yeah,
good programming principles are always welcome.
I say pick your poison. There's reasons for each of those. So I wouldn't get, by the way, don't get hung up on which language you're going to learn. It's more about getting your feet wet and learning, rather than worrying about which language. Because as much as people say this, it's actually true. You can switch languages later once you have the basic principles down. And it's, by the way, for me personally, it's not as easy as that sounded. It's a little bit harder for me to switch languages, but it is definitely doable. I've written in C#, Java, JavaScript, and Python just happens to be a favorite now. What about preferable test automation frameworks? Selenium, Appium, PyTest, Unit Test, Postman. Wait. Mark doesn't get a vote here. Why? Mark uses C#. He doesn't get a vote on any of this.
Well, to that point, I would say really it's whatever works for you, right? Some of you just have to try and see if it's going to work for what you're testing, and if it does, great. And some of it, like, you know, the free versus paid is also a huge consideration. If your company's not willing to fork out a bunch of money for a test framework, then you need to go out and find something free that's going to work for you. And there are a lot of products out there that fall into that category. So
yeah. So again, this is more of a, I'm going to say it's an opinion based and also experience based. So go out again, get started. If you're doing, you know, web testing, then you're probably picking something like Selenium or Cypress. I think that's Brian, actually, not Kim. Right. I think Brian's using Kim's account here. But so Selenium versus Cypress, again, go try it out and see which one works for you and your circumstances. They both have limitations. And the same thing, Selenium versus Appium isn't actually a comparison. Appium is for mobile, Selenium's for web. So that's not like you don't get to choose. I like Appium more, so therefore I'm only going to test mobile and just ignore the web, or what you have to choose what works for your situation. All right, any additional questions before I give my summary notes on Mark's presentation? All right, so here's the stuff that I learned, Mark, from your presentation. I've got some good notes here. I came up with the 3 C's of benefits for having one of these programs. It's career growth, confidence, and commitment. Because they're more committed to staying with your business if you're willing to offer them career growth opportunities, and also they're more confident because they have the skills. And ironically, when you provide them these skills, they're less likely to leave your business or company. They're more likely to stay because they see the opportunities and the growth benefits. It's really important to show the benefits of whatever you're doing as a tester. Again, tonight we're talking about this automation, but anything that you're doing, you've got to put it somewhere where people can see it. You know, the number of tests run or the bugs that are found or whatever, you've got to show that. Automation doesn't replace all manual testing. Automation takes time. Code reviews, this was awesome. You said that you do code reviews on all check-ins, which I completely disagree with. It's such a waste of time, except that it's totally not. And one of the side benefits is then someone else knows the code. And this happens so much, especially with QA engineers. They create a framework and they're the only ones that know the framework. But if you have somebody else reviewing your code, then at least one other person is going to know your code and can jump in and help out with your framework when you leave. It's important to celebrate all victories, big and small. And you mentioned celebrating kind of that first test running. And you don't even have to provide like a gift card or anything for that celebration. It's such an internal excitement when you get that first test case running. And then I think this is supposed to be about budgets, but you said if you don't use it, you lose it. And that's so true when it comes to our talents and developer skills, but every other skill, right? When you fall out of practice with those skills, you start to lose those skills. And then this is probably just my own note, but I like that you said as you started this initiative, it became something that everybody talked about, right? And it doesn't, like, once again, doesn't have to be automation, right? Any initiative that you have in your company, when you start talking about it and you get everybody involved, then you notice that everybody's talking about it. And it's that snowball effect, right? It gets bigger and bigger. I love the idea of individual code repos, and not just for the fact that it allows you to keep track of others, but it once again allows them to show off the progress and what they've been able to do. It's a great accountability, but also opportunity and platform. And also, depending on the situation, something they can actually take with them as they move to another job, another portfolio, another team, whatever it may be. Really important, and this is actually a question of the day for me, is what skills are you working on today, right? So it's not, once again, it's not just automation. Everybody should be learning something new. And if you're not using it, you're losing it. So be learning something new. And then I thought this was interesting. You got everybody in the room and made everybody commit to following this program. And I don't know if this is like an AA meeting or if it was like Weight Watchers or what it was, but you know, getting everybody in the same room and then asking everybody to commit to this is actually super important. I noticed that as well at Domo when we were trying to get a little Python group together. And when we didn't have that commitment, people dropped out or didn't show up. But then when we said, hey, this is for you, do you want to do this? And they said, yes. It totally turned it around, and we've had people completing their exercises and learning the automation or the code. So awesome, I love that. I do want to be in that meeting and not have to be part of the meeting. I want to be like a fly on the wall when you're like, do you commit to participating in this? And then overall, establish a plan. Again, you talked about automation, but hopefully everybody can take away something from this, whether it's about automation or not, because it's the same, structure. Establish a plan, get management approval, get team buy-in, and then hold the team accountable. And I actually would like to have you post in Slack, because I don't want to spend the rest of the night talking about this, but how did you get management approval? What did that presentation look like? What questions did management have about it? Because we have a lot of people, individual contributors, and a lot of people that have never presented to management, that they don't know what does that look like? How do I go to my boss and convince my boss that I should be allowed, in your case, like 20% of my time? I want 20% of my time to work on this project. And most managers need justification, right, for 20%. If you say, hey, I need an hour here or there, you don't even have to ask, just go take the hour. But when you're asking for 20% commitment over a long period of time, I would like to hear more details on that. And when you did this get team buy-in, were the developers in the room as well? Or was this only the QA engineers?
It was only the QA engineers.
Interesting. Yeah, I think, anyway, I think it's important also to have the developer buy-in, just for, not because they're going to say yay or nay, but just so that they know what the QA team is working on and they can appreciate it as well as support it. And I think that's really important. And then my final quote, I kind of messed with your quote, but release or hotfix Friday turns into wasted weekend. That's my experience. So steer clear of those release Fridays or the hotfix Fridays. Cool. Any other comments or questions from attendees or participants or whatever you want to call yourselves? Okay, awesome. Then thank you, Mark. And we will stop the recording now, but we will.